many employers, and I say this from a place of respect, I've fallen into this category myself when I was first starting out. We think, well, I'm going to hire people that are like me. I'm going to hire people that see the world the way I do. And that's fine. And I appreciate that. But know that you are getting a very limited worldview if you only hire people that look, sound, and act like you, because you're going to miss opportunities in the marketplace with your customers, with your prospects, that a more diverse, more broader perspective, a different skill set might be able to navigate in a more efficient way. If I'm the big visionary and kind of the, extroverted personality in my brand, which is what describes many, many entrepreneurs, especially when they're first starting out, you don't necessarily want another one of you. Oh, and by the way, when you talk about like, oh, I want my employees to be more entrepreneurial. Well, the more entrepreneurial they are, the less likely they want to be an employee.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the None of Your Business podcast. And oh my gosh, are you in for a phenomenal treat today? I want you to make sure that you are locked in. So make sure that you have the ability to take notes today. Today is going to be incredibly... Or re-listen.
Yeah.
Yes. Maybe you want to slow it down from 2x speed so we don't sound like Alvin and the Chipmunks. You're going to want to pick up every nugget from today's podcast when it comes to experience. And that's why I love today's guest, because this podcast is all about service-based entrepreneurs. Hey, all of us make our living by serving other people. And basically, because there's not a tangible thing, you don't leave with an eraser or a croissant or something that we put in your hand. It's an act of service, and we're exchanging value through the service that we bring, which means largely, of course, there's the result of the service, but it's largely experiential. It's the experience of the service. It's what you bring when you walk in. And today's guest, we'll just give it away, wrote a super famous and popular book, Never Lose a Customer Again, never lose a customer from the experience. But now he's back, and that's also rare on the None of Your Business podcast, that we would have a repeat guest, because today we're talking about employees. And let me tell you why I thought this was smart. Because when it comes to service-based professionals, two things that definitely must be most important to you, and that is customers and employees. I will tell you the single most important thing to you, which most of people don't understand, is prospects. And so Joey's next book is probably Never Lose a Prospect, right? So that one's probably coming. Let's bring him in. You already know who he is. Joey Coleman, welcome to the None of Your Business podcast.
Oh, Sean, thank you so much for having me back. So great to be reconnected with you and Lacey. Really appreciate it.
So it's either going to be Never Lose a Prospect or Never Lose Your Keys. Which one do you think it's going to be?
I'm not sure. These books kind of come out of the ether and they invent themselves. So we'll see. My hope is that it's not 5 years between books like it was on this last one. But, it's a process. Book writing is fun and I enjoy it. And I'm super excited to get to share the research, the findings, and the amazing stories that I unearthed while putting together this new book.
Well, get us up to speed for anybody who is not a longtime listener of the podcast, or maybe they were born in 2019. And so they don't know about the previous book and the previous work that you've done. Tell us a little bit about your journey. How do you become the Never Lose expert, and all of the great work that you've done? But this journey, how do you get to this point to where so many people are turning to you for advice and counsel?
Yeah, well, it has been an eclectic path, to say the least, Sean. I was a criminal defense lawyer. I worked for the Secret Service, the CIA, and the White House. I taught at the postgraduate level. I ran an ad agency for 15 years. I did Fortune 500 business consulting. And while some people may look at that and say, well, geez, it sounds like Joey can't hold down a job, the common thread that connected all of those things was, in order to succeed in any of those positions or careers I had, you had to have a keen understanding of the human experience. Why is it that people do the things they do? And what can we do to convince, persuade, encourage them to do the things we'd like them to do? And that led me on an epic quest to explore experiences. And my first book, Never Lose a Customer Again, was all about the customer journey and what we can do to create remarkable customer experiences from the time when someone's first a prospect. So, getting back to that prospect experience, all the way up until they're a raving fan advocate for your service or product offerings. And after having that book come out, I wanted to explore the employee experience because I see customer experience and employee experience as being two sides of the same coin. As you improve one, you noticeably improve the other. As one is struggling, the other side starts struggling too. So, what can we do as business leaders, as business owners, to create the kind of experiences that keep our customers and our employees coming back for more?
Man, I have to tell you, I just love these concepts so much. And in fact, I wish we had this conversation earlier because I did a training this morning on the customer experience and how important it was for retention. But honestly, you can't have great customer experience if you don't have happy employees. And so you're right, they are so intertwined. And I think oftentimes we don't look within our business often enough as a leader in order to really elevate and evolve that process. So tell us a little bit about like if I'm a service-based professional, I'm just getting into this employee thing and learning leadership, which oftentimes was not taught to me. What are some things that I can do to begin to step up so that I can bring in the right people and then more importantly retain them?
Yeah, I so appreciate this question, Lacey. I think at the end of the day, the first thing we must do as leaders is to recognize that our employees are on a journey. And that journey begins the first time they learn of an open position with our organization. So they see a job posting or a classified ad or the careers page on our website, and they start to think, what would it be like to work there? That journey continues up until the point where hopefully they are a raving fan of our organization, singing our praises far and wide, writing reviews on Glassdoor, reaching out whenever we have a new open position to recruit their friends, their colleagues, the best people they've ever worked with to come join our organization. I think one of the challenges many employers have is they come to their employee needs or their employee issues from a place of urgency and crisis. Oh my gosh, we've got to get somebody in this role because we're struggling. Or, oh my gosh, so and so left. We've got to quickly fill their seat so that we can be back up and running. And they don't necessarily spend the time or the intentionality to make sure that the folks they're recruiting, that they're hiring, that they're onboarding, and that ideally they're engaging and retaining long term are part of a systematic approach to evaluating that employee journey.
I want to touch on this. I want to see where this goes because I know too that you have a new book coming out, right? So we're going to be talking about that. And I know that you are also, then obviously, with it, this book's going to be bestseller instantaneously. You're going to be on all the shows. I want to talk to you about the other side of the coin. So never lose an employee. Um, what about, so a lot of people get it wrong. And I think one of the hardest things is how to lose an employee. So if I have a bunch of really great employees, this and one bad employee, this one bad employee is wrecking the
Culture and the
experience for
experience.
everyone else.
Yeah.
Now, yes, you are true. Like you're correct. Like, oh, we rushed into this hire. So I didn't do everything I should have done. I've got the wrong person. And then human nature kicks in as a leader, as a boss, and we don't want to fire them. And so we drag it on. Can you talk to me a little bit? Hopefully, this has never been asked of you. Anything that you've learned, the research wise, about how to effectively, one, make the decision, and two, because I think part of like how I get rid of this person will affect everyone else too. Because I could just come in and be like, Joey, pack your stuff and leave. And now all my good employees are like
Scared.
nervous. And so, can you talk to us about how to lose an employee first before we talk about how to never lose an employee?
Well, here's the interesting thing, Sean, and this may just be a game of semantics, but the reason the book is called Never Lose an Employee Again is because I want to avoid business leaders having this all too familiar interaction where an employee walks in and says, I'm giving my 2 weeks notice,
Mm.
or I'm quitting, or I'm leaving. The idea of loss is something that you wanted to keep going away from you.
Mm.
Sure.
Notice the book isn't called Keep All the Employees, because that's not what you
Right.
should do. If it was about keeping everyone, we would have titled the book differently. I
Right.
just don't want you to lose the ones you want to keep. Now, here's the thing. If you don't have systems, if you don't have processes, if you go by gut instinct instead of thoughtful metrics for evaluating your potential new hires, there are going to be people that get in that should never have gotten in to start with. And you definitely need to exit those people from your organization. At the very least, you need to consider, are they just in the wrong seat on the bus? Are they in the wrong position? And maybe move them to a different position. But sometimes you get someone in and you're like, this just isn't a good fit. There's an old maxim in the HR world and amongst entrepreneurs globally that we should hire slow and fire fast. And while there are many maxims out there, this is one that I can actually get behind. I think all too often we are in such a rush to fill the seat with anyone that we miss all the little signals that should have let us know that this person wasn't a good fit long term. Or we are operating from such a short-sighted point of view that we're like, well, let's just get somebody in the seat and then we'll see how it goes. And worst case scenario, we can sort it out later. That's like inviting in a cancer into your organization. And you are absolutely right. Nothing crushes team morale faster than a bad coworker, somebody who is disrespectful, somebody who isn't pulling their weight, somebody who isn't aligned with the team's values and images. And when they leave, two things happen in the typical organization. Number one, the leader says, hey, so Maria left and I'm so sorry about that, but we're going to need you to pick up the slack. We're not going to give you more money or a raise in title, but just do all of her work until we can get somebody fit in. Automatically, employees feel unappreciated.
Mm.
Then they go home and they sit down with their loved ones that night and they're like, Maria left today. She'd only been here like 2 weeks. What does she know that I don't know? What did she figure? I mean, she was brand new. I would never leave a job that quickly. Did she see the writing on the wall? Was she exposed to some other stuff? What should I be considering leaving? And next thing we've experienced is a huge reduction in productivity and a huge reduction in morale, all because we didn't thoughtfully bring the right person into the job. And that's why I say this journey starts with the very first job posting or the careers page or the About Us page on your website. How are you always recruiting? How are you always putting your brand, your employer brand, out to the world as we are an employer of choice, somewhere you should want to spend time in your career?
Mm.
This is really interesting because I had a question for you, but now I'm shifting gears because you utilize the words thoughtfully. And I think this is really important, like thoughtfully bringing in the right person. And I've oftentimes talked to my clients about you guys create these avatars for your business, the ideal client, and you put all this work and all this thought into them, and you write out their demographics and their likes and their dislikes and their needs and their desires. And yet you've never actually done that for the people that work for you. Who are they? What is their philosophy around life and business? How do they engage and interact in their life? What do their demographics look like? So tell me what your version is of that thoughtfulness so that somebody can understand how to begin to prepare to even put an ad out there to bring in that right person.
Lacey, it is so true. I think often employers come to a new hire from the place of what do we need done
Right.
instead of from a place of who are we inviting in? And it
Yeah.
really is an invitation. Here's the crazy thing about customers. And to your point, and I love this observation. We create customer avatars. We create profiles of the type of folks we want to get. And if you bring in the wrong customer, it can cause an impact on your business and it can be negative for your business. But the magnitude of that impact compared to the wrong employee, oh my
Mhm.
goodness, we're not even in the same conversation. The wrong employee is affecting potentially every customer and every coworker, especially when you're a small and growing organization.
Mhm.
People talk to me all the time. They're like, well, Joey, is this book applicable if, we're getting ready to hire our first employee and I'm a solo entrepreneur? And I'm like, actually, it's probably more applicable to you than the company that has 1,000 employees. Because if 1,000-person company hires one wrong person, that's 1 in 1,000 that's an issue. If A solo entrepreneur makes the wrong first hire, 50% of the employee base is a problem. So the smaller your company is, I would posit, the more important it is to get those hires right. And now we get to that question about, well, what type of person should we hire? And again, I think many employers, and I say this from a place of respect, I've fallen into this category myself when I was first starting out. We think, well, I'm going to hire people that are like me. I'm going to hire people that see the world the way I do. And that's
Mhm.
fine. And I appreciate that. But know that you are getting a very limited worldview if you
Mm,
only hire people that look, sound, and act like you,
right.
because you're going to miss opportunities in the marketplace with your customers, with your prospects, that a more diverse, more broader perspective, a different skill set might be able to navigate in a more efficient way. If I'm the big visionary and kind of the, extroverted personality in my brand, which is what describes many, many entrepreneurs, especially when they're first starting out, you don't necessarily want another one of you. Oh, and by the way, when you talk about like, oh, I want my employees to be more entrepreneurial. Well, the more entrepreneurial they are, the less likely they want to be an employee.
Right.
Because it's the thing that amazes me. They're like, I just want people that, care about the business as much as I do. Folks, if they wanted to care about your business as much as you do, they would have started their own business. This
Right.
is really simple. You want people that are bought into your vision, that are in alignment with your values, that want to move in the same direction, that want to be team players, that want to contribute. Those are the kind of folks you want to be seeking out. And
Mm,
to paraphrase on the great real estate line of, what's the most important thing in real estate? Location, location, location. What's the most important thing when it comes to employee experience? Recruiting, recruiting, recruiting. You
mm,
need to always be navigating your life with eyes wide open for the right person. I have told many people I've interacted with over my career, hey, if you ever decide you're unhappy here, here's my email. Send me a message. Let me know if you're interested. I'm not sure I'll have a position. I'm not sure, but I know based on my interactions I've already had with you that I want to stay in touch and I want that experience to happen. And as a
oh,
result, not only have I found some great folks to work with, but I've received Boomerang employees. And what I mean by a Boomerang employee is somebody who works for you, does a great job, leaves for some reason that maybe was completely outside of your control. Please don't burn the bridges. So many leaders, they're like, oh, you left me. You're dead to me. We're broken up. I'm heartbroken. It's like, maybe they just moved. Maybe they wanted to try
right.
something different. Maybe their spouse got a job in a different state and you weren't allowing remote workers. And so it had nothing to do with you and everything with them wanting to keep their marriage intact.
Mhm,
Why not stay in touch with those people and have them be advocates and welcome them back with open arms when they come back with more skill sets, more experience, and fresh eyes on your business?
mhm. I love it.
I love that concept. I talk about that all the time. And most of our employees were working
It's
somewhere and
poaching
very
season.
much, yeah, poaching, but not in a bad
No, yeah,
way.
not in a
It's like,
negative sense
hey,
of
if
poaching.
you
It's
ever
just
want
like
to, come
I
over here, I think you're
I see you in
phenomenal.
the wild, right? Like in an environment where you're actually treating me like a customer. So I truly know how you're going to show up versus the way you show up in an interview.
And
That's
and
important.
one of the things Joey touched on that I think is super important that people minimize on always be recruiting, oftentimes people only try to recruit locally, especially if you have a
Mhm.
brick and mortar. And I tell them, like, hey, listen, if you are in LA and your business was in Naples and you told them, hey, I don't know, maybe if you ever moved to Naples, I would love to hire. Because so many times they're like, oh my gosh, I have an aunt in Naples. I would love to move there. I didn't have an opportunity, because we think we have a limited thought process when it comes to
Yes.
recruiting. Now I'm going to give the softball question, the one that everybody's asked. So you could just
Yeah.
Google this and get Joey's answers to this. But if the book is called Never Lose an Employee Again, give us what you have found to be some of the blatantly obvious to you, but maybe not to us, reasons why we are losing employees.
Well, I like to look to the research, Sean. Okay. We all have our instincts and our beliefs about why people lose employees,
Let
and
me
that's
tell you,
great.
you know what I think it is? You know what I think the instinct is? Pay.
No, I think it's
Yes.
communicate. I think it's communication.
Well, I think the instinct is like they can make more money somewhere else.
Oh, we're
Well,
going to find out.
and as usual, Sean has his opinion and Lacey has the truth. I love it. This is great. We're set. This is absolutely brilliant. It plays out as usual, I imagine. So
Yes,
here's the thing,
absolutely. You're
Sean.
correct.
So when you look at most of the research about why employees leave, most of the studies and research that have been done are based on a sample set of 300 to 500 exit interviews. That's kind of the industry standard around figuring out why employees leave. I'm a recovering attorney. Okay. My theory is I want to do the research. I want to dive into the numbers. I want to get statistically relevant data to figure out what is true. So, in my research, I came across an organization called Work Institute that had done a study on why employees leave based on a sample set of 230,000 exit interviews. Not 230, 230,000, a magnitude greater than the typical study. And to your point, Sean, they found that there are a lot of employees that leave because of money. They'll get more pay somewhere else. 9% of them. So 9% of employees who leave for more money. And that's important and that's significant.
Sure.
But where I got curious was, what about the other 91%? Great. There's probably not a lot I can do about the 9% who leave for more money other than paying attention to what you're paying people and making sure they're fairly compensated. But there's going to be a point where someone in the market can outpay you. This is just the way life works. What about the other 91%? Well, when we look at the research, what we found is of that other 91%, 23%, or almost 3 times the number of people who leave for pay, left for a single reason. They didn't have a clear understanding of their career path at that organization. They didn't understand what their opportunity for growth and development and advancement was within the organization where they were working. So, to Lacey's point, communication. Their boss or their manager hadn't been sitting down talking with them about, okay, here's where you are today. Where do you want to be 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now? What can we do to help you path this out? And one of the things that was really important to me is that this book was driven not only by research, but actual real world examples, practical case studies. So there's over 50 case studies in the book from all 7 continents. And one of my favorite case studies that speaks directly to this issue of career pathing comes from an organization called Well Oiled Operations. Now, Well Oiled Operations has about a dozen employees. And they do something really unique. Every year, they bring their employees together for an annual retreat. Now, that's not totally unique, but for a small team of only, a dozen or so people, 2 dozen people, that's fairly unique. And they present them the vision of where the organization is going to be in 3 years. Now, again, not entirely unique. A lot of CEOs present their company vision. But what they do next, it is the only company I've ever seen do this. They present the org chart, the listing of the various positions and roles in the company 3 years from now. And they say to the team, as you look through this org chart, if you see a role or a position that you think you might be interested in having in the future, please let us know, because we want to talk about getting you from where you are to that role, even if that role doesn't exist today. What this does is 2 things. Number one, it sparks conversations with everyone on the team about where they are and where they want to go. Number two, it lets everyone in the organization know that the roles that are available today are going to be augmented. They are going to be enhanced. There are going to be new roles in the future. So if you've got an employee who's looking at their boss and saying, well, I'm 30 and my boss is 60 and my boss has said they're going to be there for another 10 years. So it's going to be 10 years before I can get a promotion. When they see the future org chart and they see an entirely new division coming in 3 years, they can now see that they might be able to head a different division and not need to wait for their boss to retire. This type of clarity, this type of insight leads directly to employee retention.
That's literally so powerful. I mean, for people to be able to really infuse themselves into the vision of the company, I can imagine how that would create just a uplifting and productive culture as well. But I want to take it a step back, because one of the things that I recognize when I'm working with clients, and they're small and they're getting started and figuring out how to lead a team, one of the problems I notice is that employees oftentimes don't even know if they're doing a good job in the first place, let alone am I able to elevate into a new role or the next step. Oftentimes they're like, man, I don't even know how I'm doing, how I'm performing. Am I making my boss happy? Am I meeting expectations? So, do you see that as a pitfall? And what advice do you have for people when they're trying to just open that first initial set of communication?
Lacey, you're so right. It's a huge pitfall, and it's a pitfall for a variety of reasons. I think many leaders want their employees to be all things to all people. We need
Mm.
you to be on time and do a good job and send the right emails and follow up in a timely manner and convert sales in this way and do this. And we list out 70 things without giving them any idea of the prioritization.
Mm.
And then we come to their annual review. And here's how the typical annual review goes. Well, first of all, it gets rescheduled multiple times
Oh
because we
no.
don't actually make it a priority.
Yeah.
Okay. And if any of you listening are kind of like hiding a little right now, don't worry. I see you. Okay. I understand. We move meetings with our team. We move their one on ones at a level that we would never think of doing that with a prospect or a client. But yet we will happily, especially top leaders, sacrifice a meeting with a direct report or a team member because something else more important came up. We've got to do a better job. We've got to do a better job of communicating our expectations and regularly checking in on those. Let me give you an example of how I do this. I'm a small business owner, right? I don't have hundreds of employees. I have a half a dozen. And here's what I do. With my assistant and I were just talking about this. And actually, she's not my assistant. She's my director of details. Okay? You have the right to give your people titles. Give them titles that matter. And my Faith, who's her name, my director of details, the most important aspect of her job is in her title. She gets to pay attention to the details. I'm here, there, and everywhere. I travel internationally. I'm on the road 2.5 weeks out of every month. I'm giving keynotes. I'm doing podcasts. I'm writing books. I need someone following behind, making sure that T's are crossed, I's are dotted. I'm in the right time zone. I have the right link for the podcast, etc. So it's imbued in her title. But one of the things we do is the quarterly review. Instead of an annual review, we do a quarterly review. And it's a 360 quarterly review, which means we spend a half an hour with me sharing with her, here's what you're doing that I'm loving. Here's what you're doing that is going pretty well, but we could probably double down on. And here's some things that I'd like you to start doing. And then after we've had that conversation, we have a separate conversation, like 1 or 2 days later, where it runs the other way. She tells me, here are the things I'm loving. Here are the things that you're doing okay, but you could double down on and do better. And here's some things that you're just not doing, Joey, that I need you to start doing. The empowerment that gives to a team member, the buy-in that you get for your organization when you hear their voice, when you give them the space to do that, and you do it on a regular basis, is unbelievable. We've got to do a better job not only letting our employees know what we need from them, but being open for them to express what they need from us.
Mhm.
Mm. So I told everybody you were gonna have to have a notepad and you were gonna want to take some notes. I was right.
You were right, and I think that that's really important because I know that often people they don't know how to communicate. They don't know when it's appropriate, what they're allowed to say, how to be able to do it, like the actual mechanism or system around it. So giving people that, like you said, designated space to do so will, I think, really like allow them to open up and be a little bit vulnerable and speak that truth. Because again, in my teaching today, I said, hey, if you want to create a better experience for your clients, do a focus group. Ask them what could be improved. Ask them what you need to shift and change. And you need to be open-minded to it. To think that we don't do that with our employees, the very thing that drives the culture and keeps customers happy, like it's so obvious, but not, right? So thank you for
Well,
that.
I have a. Oh, go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Joey. Go
I
ahead.
was going to say, my pleasure, Lacey. And here's the interesting thing. It needs to be scheduled.
Yeah.
It can't just be, oh, we're going to do it. Let me give
Yeah.
you a story, if I may, that didn't make the book. It's a case study from the Ritz Carlton. And with all due respect, if the Ritz Carlton didn't make the book, I promise
Yeah.
you there's some stories in the book that you want to learn about, right? And all due
Sure.
respect to Ritz Carlton. But here's something Ritz Carlton does unique. On day 21, so you start the job on day one, you have your first day on the job. 21 days later, you've been on the job for about 3 weeks, okay? They bring you into a meeting. And that meeting is with your boss and your boss's boss and the other executives on the property. And you're a brand new employee. You've been there 3 weeks. And here's the agenda for that meeting. Let's pretend it's Lacey coming to that meeting. And we would say, okay, Lacey, you've been here for about 3 weeks. We've got a couple questions for you. Number one, what are we doing that you think, gosh, it's kind of crazy that you do it this way? Why do you do it this way? There's a better way to do it. There's a smarter way to do it. Question number two, what aren't we doing that we should be doing?
Hmm.
Now, these two questions allow us to take a brand new employee who isn't jaded, who hasn't bought into the, well, we do it that way because we've always done it that way, that has fresh eyes, who has unique perspective, and we're getting that level of feedback and insight from them. And by inviting executives to come to that meeting with a brand new employee, we are saying to an employee before they've had their 1 month anniversary, your perspective matters. Your views matter. Your ideas matter, and we want those. We want them now. We want them in the future. We want them regularly. Please keep bringing them to us. That's how you create a culture that can stand the test of time. You're open to the feedback. You're open to the ideas. You're fostering those type of communications and those type of conversations from early on in the relationship, as opposed to waiting till somebody's been here, 5 years and you're like, oh, well, now that I trust you, what do you think about it? It's like,
Right.
really? We should have been getting your viewpoint much earlier.
Well, my next question comes from the field. This actually got brought up inside of Black Diamond Club. When it comes to, so preemptively, they didn't know we were going to talk to Joey, but I'm going to get the expert answered. When it comes to experience, a question came up like, how should we handle, say, work anniversaries, birthdays, recognition? Give us some of the best practices that you've observed that you have found. Like, what's the best way to go about that?
Well, the best way to go about it, Sean, is to acknowledge it. Okay. And I know that may seem obvious, but I was in a conversation the other day with a client, and they said, I was working with my team, and one of my team members came up and said, do you know what today is? And I said, no, I don't know what today is. And this team member said to my client, it's my 7-year anniversary of starting here. Now, my client said to me, Joey, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed because I didn't know, and I hadn't planned anything to acknowledge it. This employee had been a valued, trusted, contributing member of the team for 7 years, and it wasn't acknowledged. So I'm not being flippant when I say the first thing is to track it and acknowledge it. Sometimes that alone is enough. Number two, there should be a benefit to staying with your organization longer. Each year that an employee spends with you is a year that they will never be able to get back. It's a part of their career that they could have worked somewhere else. They could have been doing something differently, but they gave that time to you. There's a case study in the book from a company called N2 Publishing. N2 Publishing makes neighborhood magazines. So if you live in a nice neighborhood, which I know many of the folks listening to this podcast do, and you get like a neighborhood magazine that features some of the folks who live in your neighborhood and talks about them and their businesses and their kids and what they do, this is the company that publishes those. And on the 2-year anniversary of your employment, they invite that new employee to a room with all of their colleagues, and they present them with a gift. And the gift is a check for $7,000 towards the down payment on a new home. Now, N2 believes in neighborhoods. They believe in the power of living in a neighborhood that's in alignment with where you are and where you want to go. And so their whole business is designed around home ownership and where do you live? And since many of their employees come to N2 fresh out of college, most of them don't already have homes. So this is a substantial gift. Now, before anybody listening says, well, Joey, I don't know that I could afford $7,000, or I don't know that my client or my employees need new homes. They already have homes. Don't get lost in the detail. The point is there a stacking escalation of showing how much you appreciate and value that employee that is commensurate with their tenure? If you want them to stay to year 7 should feel better than year 2. It should feel better than year 4. What are you doing to make sure they feel that way?
Where do we stop? Birthday, and anniversary for with their spouse? Like, where should we? Where have we gone too far?
I think I think that's a great question. I don't know that there is a too far, in the sense that if it's something that is truly valued and appreciated by the employee, continuing to do it, doing more of it, deepens the relationship. Let's say you've got an employee that gets married, and you're like, okay, I'm going to celebrate your work anniversary, but I'm also going to celebrate the fact that you just got married. When you come to their wedding anniversary, do you have to acknowledge that? No. But if you did, what does it say? It says, I care about what happens in your life between 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. as much as I care about what happens in your life between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. I believe, Sean, that the best companies in the world, the companies that are going to be seen 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now as the best employers on the planet, are the ones who are going to recognize and show regularly that they understand that their employees are people
Mhm.
and that those people have lives outside of their work. Now, I know there may be some folks listening that are like, Joey, that feels uncomfortable. It feels invasive. I don't want to know what's going on their weekends and in their private lives. I'm not saying be creepy and weird and intrusive. What I am saying is, if you know your employee is married, acknowledge their marriage. If you know they have kids, acknowledge their kids. If you know they have a pet, acknowledge their pet. If you know that they've got a child that's graduating from high school or college, acknowledge the graduation. If you know they've got a parent who is in the hospital and is sick, acknowledge that reality. Meet your people where they're at. Treat them like humans, and they will do anything for you because they
Mhm.
feel seen, they feel heard, they feel appreciated.
One last question I've got to get in because I deal with this a lot as well with clients, and I'd love to get your perspective on this, especially with employees and caring. Is there a proper way or a best practice to admonish employees that have made a mistake? So it's not like not a 360 review. This is what you could do better. Something has happened, and now like there's the elephant in the room, and it's like I have to do this, but there's a way that I could do it, dress you down, make you feel uncomfortable, that probably leaves you at the end of the day as an employee thinking like, now I'm going to find my way out, right?
Right.
But at the same time, I, as the leader, I can't just leave that. I can't let it go because also every other employee will wonder, does Sean even realize what's happening? What is the best practice when there's actually something that needs to be addressed and I want to address it in a way that will be best for all parties involved?
I think you hit on the answer to your question in the final phrase, in the best way for all parties involved. What many leaders do is they admonish or they critique employees in the way that works for them.
Mm.
So if they were coming up and they liked being yelled at and you're an idiot, you got to do better, they've been conditioned to say, oh, when somebody does something wrong, you yell, you're an idiot. You got to do better. Now, I would posit that that's never the right choice. But if that's your upbringing, that's your experience, frankly, that's your trauma, let's work through that on a therapist couch instead of with your employees. Instead, what I like to do is say, what is the best way for you to receive feedback? This is something that you can ask in an interview before they're even an employee. You say, hey, if you come to work for us and you do an amazing job and we're really proud of you, what is your favorite way for that to be expressed? Is it verbally? Is it with a gift? Is it with a kind note? Is it throwing a party with the team? Let them answer. Give them a couple choices and then let them answer and say, can you give me some examples of past jobs you've had where you did something well and the way you were treated by your employer or by your boss left you feeling like, yes, I want to do more of this. Then shift the conversation and say, on the off chance that something doesn't go well, on the off chance that something has happened that we had explained it to you and you knew what you were supposed to do, and for whatever reason you didn't do it the way our system asked you to do it, the way your training shows you to do it, how would you like us to bring that up? How would you like us to address that with you? Now, some folks listening may say, well, Joey, that sounds a little too touchy feely to me. That sounds a little too kind. Well, I'm sorry that you've grown up in an environment where yelling at someone and admonishing them is your default mechanism. Okay. Because most of us, there's a saying in the world of psychology, hurt people hurt people. And lots of times as leaders, the way we treat our people is based on our conditioning of how we were treated coming up. That isn't necessarily the most effective way to treat your fellow human. So explore with them. Now, do I think that employees need to be told when they make mistakes? Absolutely. But what I like to do is sit down and say, okay, this happened. Let's address the thing. This email was sent out and it was sent out with the wrong information. Why did that happen? Get curious before you get critical. And the employee may say, I didn't know that was the wrong information. Well, me screaming at you or admonishing you isn't going to be useful if the employee didn't. How did you not know? Well, no one ever told me what the right information was. Okay. Do you have a thought of how you could have gone and found the right information? Well, no, because I don't even know where that information comes from. Okay, now we've identified a flaw in our onboarding and training process, not a flaw with our person, a flaw with our process. Now, if the process is established and we know the process does not have flaws and we know the process works and the employee doesn't follow the process, now we have a flaw with the person. Now we can say, we know the process, we've talked about the process. How can we avoid this mistake happening again? How can we avoid this from being an issue? And what do you suggest we do if it does happen in the future? Now the employee is saying, well, I mean, if it does happen in the future, I don't think I should be able to work here anymore.
Mhm.
Oh, well, thank you for that suggestion. And that will be the criteria then that we apply. So
Mm.
please don't make this mistake again.
Love it. Love it. The book is called Never Lose an Employee Again. Tell us, one, where do we get a hold of a copy of the book? Two, no, just tell us first that. 'Cause I don't want people to
Yeah.
All
miss
right.
that.
So the book is available wherever you like to get books in whatever format you like to get books. Okay. So we have a hardcover version if you like to physically hold a book in your hand. We have an ebook version if you're into the e-readers, the Kindle, the Nook, you're taken care of. And if you like the sound of my voice in this podcast, we have an audiobook that I narrate. So I will read the book to you. It's available at your favorite indie bookstore, your favorite online bookstore, your favorite traditional store, wherever it may be. It's available globally. Go and check it out. My goal and my promise to you is that you will find at least a half dozen things that if you implement them in your business will dramatically change your productivity, your engagement, and your retention of your team members. That's the promise of the book. If for some reason it doesn't deliver on that promise, I've got an offer in the first few pages that says if you read the book and you don't get value, send me an email and I'll refund your purchase price. That's how confident I am that this book is going to be able to help any business leader, whether they're an owner or a manager, who reads this to get better at how they create experiences for their team.
Now, the backside of this, there are some people that listen to the podcast that I'm sure they have this in their minds. I have this in my mind for one of the businesses that I do advisory work for. With never lose a customer again, super clear, right? I would get all of my team together. I'd call Joey Coleman in. He would explain to us how to not lose a customer. On never lose an employee, who do I get? Like, let's talk about that deeper level of
Yeah.
engagement. So, do I call Joey and it's just Joey and the
Is
CEO?
it
Because
just us?
if I
Yeah.
got the whole C suite team there, some people are probably looking at the CEO saying, yeah, that's why we got a problem. So, on the deeper level of work that you're doing, what is that looking like these days?
Sean, it's fascinating you bring this up because with my first book, what would happen is I would share the book. It'd be read by a leader and they would say, oh my gosh, they'd ring me up. They'd say, Joey, we need a copy for everybody on our team. Everyone needs to read this book and we're going to do a book club about it. We're going to bring you in to do a workshop. We're going to make it better. With this book, I would send it to leaders and they'd read it and they'd go, wow, this
Yeah.
is really powerful stuff.
I got to
I
do better myself.
I need 2 copies, one for me and one for my head of HR, because, and this is a direct quote that I've heard a dozen times or more, I don't want my employees to realize how bad it is.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Friends, they already know. This is not a revelation. They're not going to suddenly go, oh my gosh, it's actually not the best place to work because I just read about a place that was awesome. No, they already know. Instead, if you said to your people, hey, I know that our employee experience is not as remarkable as it could be, and I want your contribution to make it better.
Mhm.
Come join the employee experience team. We're going to look at everything we do from our job listings up to our referral bonuses and every step in between. We're going to make it better. Who wants to be part of this conversation? I promise you, you will get hand raisers, people that say, I love this place and I want it to be better. The dregs of your company, the people who shouldn't be there, they're not going to volunteer to be on this team. They like to just keep their heads down and hope no one spots them. It'll actually be easier for you to figure out who you should lose based
Mhm.
on who responds to this conversation. So I would posit that this book is for two groups of people. Number one, for any type of an executive or leader who says, I know we could do better and I'm committed to this organization. Number two, coming back to a comment Lacey made earlier in our conversation, most managers never receive training in how to be a manager. They're promoted to manager because they were good at doing the job. This happens in sales all the time. The best salesperson gets promoted to be the head of the sales team. We take them out of the field. They're not doing sales call anymore. We see sales fall. They hate their job. They hate managing people. And across the organization, it doesn't work. This book is also for anyone on your team who manages and creates the experience of other people on your team. Because the first half of the book is about what happens before the first day on the job. The second half of the book is what happens from day 2 on the job all the way through the point where they're a zealous raving fan. Your managers, your people who lead teams, they're responsible for that second half of the book. So you can have them skip the first half if you want and say, just start reading in the middle and apply the things you learn to the teams and the people that you're responsible for looking out for.
Well, I love Never Lose a Customer Again. I'm definitely can't wait to read Never Lose an Employee again. And
And I'm now committed to doing more for our employees
yeah, I
and
love
doing
that.
better.
I
Like
love that.
you've inspired me, and I for people that are listening and feel like, oh my gosh, I feel ashamed or I feel bad, like because my employee experience isn't great. You shouldn't feel ashamed. You shouldn't feel bad. You should feel empowered to know that you can do more. And so I love that you've given us that gift.
Oh, Lacey, I so appreciate that. And yeah, if I may briefly to that point, often people, when they read either of my books, their first reaction was one of guilt and shame. Friends, please don't do that. Because here's the thing, being aware that there is an opportunity for improvement is the first and necessary step to any improvement you're going to make in your life. We have to acknowledge reality. We have to see where we stand. So if when we've been talking today, you've thought, geez, I could do a better job with my employee experience, great. You've acknowledged that there's an opportunity. Now your next question probably is, but where would I start? We'll show you where to start in the book. Well, how much is this going to cost? Well, there are dozens of ideas in the book that will take you less than a day to implement and will be able to be implemented with tools you already have paid for and have. So it's not, hey, I'm going to need to spend $600,000 and do a 10-month, consulting engagement to make my experience better. Can you do that? Sure. But you could also spend 6 minutes using your iPhone to create amazing rapport and connection with your people by the time you're done listening to this podcast. And there are ideas of how to do that in the book. So I encourage you to lean in and give it a try, as opposed to feel guilty about maybe ways you could have done it better in the past.
Love it.
Absolutely love it. Joey, you crushed it. Thank you so much for dropping in amidst your super busy schedule as you promote this phenomenal book. I thought that the book was about to be released because of the timing of recording and putting
No,
podcasts
it's
out.
out there,
It's out
everywhere
there.
in
So
the
don't screw around,
universe.
folks. We're going to get this podcast out as soon as we can so that you can hear Joey's voice and get your copy of the book as soon as you can. This is one, like I told you at the beginning, you need to re-listen to the podcast. You need to take notes. More than anything, you need to just get the book. You need to read the book and you need to apply these principles. And the last thing I was thinking is like, man, I wonder how many customers are out there that like meet Joey and are like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you wrote that book. They don't know about this, so they can't really thank him. But I bet there are many employees one day, Joey, that are going to tell you, thank you for writing this book because it changed the experience at the company
Change
where
the
I was
culture.
working
Yeah.
and it made my life so much better. The
Love
customers
that.
don't know about the stuff that's been done, the employees will recognize, and hopefully people take your advice and share the book with other leaders in the company, because then even more so they will be able to attribute this to your work. Kudos to you, Joey. You're making a big impact on the world. That's why we love having you on the podcast. Thanks for dropping in.
Oh, Sean and Lacey, thanks so much for having me. And thanks to everybody who was listening in. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention and being part of the None of Your Business podcast and being a loyal listener. Thanks for spending some time with us, and good luck as you go create those remarkable experiences for your customers and your employees alike.
Well, all right, folks, we'll try again next week. See how we can top this one. Oh, we've got our work cut out for us as usual. Thank you so much to Joey Coleman. Get a copy of the book right away, and be sure to set an alarm to join us again next week right here on the None of Your Business podcast.